You're in for a treat tonight. The future of faith. What is that? What is the future of faith? Well, it's his latest book. It's the subject of what he's going to talk about tonight. I want to welcome all of you, but most of all, I want to welcome Dr. Harvey Cox to come and speak to us tonight. Let's give him a warm Huntsville welcome.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And I do want to extend a special thank you to Reverend David Hall and this First Baptist Church for opening your doors to all of us here and to welcome all of you. I'm a little intimidated because there are some people here who've been in the audience twice now, and I'm beginning to think that maybe if I start repeating myself, it's going to be a little embarrassing. So I'll try to be original tonight as much as I can. I want to bring you greetings from my students and my faculty up from Harvard University, which started out in 1636 as a small school out in the wilderness there to train ministers. I like to remind all of my colleagues in the chemistry department or engineering or business administration that they're all branches of a school that was really originally designed to train ministers. In fact, the founding document of Harvard College states in good old Puritan language, we are founding this college, it says, so that when our present ministers shall lie in the dust, we shall not be left with the curse of an ignorant clergy. They were pretty pungent back in those days. They didn't mince their words. So we've been doing our best. And I teach in the Divinity School at Harvard, the continuation of that earliest mandate. And I also teach at Harvard College. I have the wonderful privilege of teaching both undergraduates, young people from, say, 18 to 22, in our religious studies program, and teaching people in the Divinity School, preparing them for ministries. Over 500 students now in our Divinity School, preparing for ministry in, I think, at last count, 31 different denominations, churches, and faiths, including quite a few Baptists there, David, and Pentecostals and Presbyterians and Roman Catholics, and now some Buddhists and some Muslims and some Jewish students. We're becoming more and more inclusive. And one of the reasons students tell us that they've chosen that school instead of some others is precisely because they like the idea of studying along with people who are representatives of these various paths to God that we all live in the midst of nowadays. So the future of faith, what a dangerous subject to talk about or write about. It even seems a little pretentious in a way, doesn't it? So let me start out with a warning, like you might have on the side of a cigarette package. This could be dangerous to your health, because nobody really knows. Nobody but God knows about this. All the rest is speculation. And there have been some famous speculations in the past about the future of religion that have ended up in wreckage. They just didn't turn out that well. When I started teaching around 50 years ago now, I confess, it was thought to be sort of common knowledge among a certain group of scholars, observers of culture and religion and civilization. There was kind of a consensus that religion was declining. It would continue to decline as scientific education, literacy, communication across barriers grew. It wouldn't completely disappear. There'd still be some people practicing religion here and there, little enclaves, family rituals perhaps, references in literature that you have to explain to your students because they had to do with religion. But religion as a shaper of whole cultures, as it has been in the past, religion as an influence in public life was declining and would continue to decline in the foreseeable future. That was not that long ago. You can probably remember that, David. That was about 50 years ago, and some of the books we had to read in seminary were books like Religion and the Modern Mind, or Religion and Modern Skepticism, and things like that. How do you make the Christian gospel understandable or knowable to people who are in this mentality? Now, that was a guess about the future of faith, that it was on the way down and out, or at least to the margins. Now, whatever else you might say about what happened to religion around the world in the last 50 years, it did not disappear. Anybody with an eye on the television set or an ear to the radio, especially the car radio, especially AM, knows that religion is still around. It has not disappeared. In fact, there has been this quite remarkable, unexpected resurgence of religion in the various religious traditions around the world. And we live in the midst not so much of religion and the modern skeptical mind as religion in a world in which we have religious renaissances and revivals and resurgences going on. Now let me add very quickly that for someone who's studied religion for as long as I have, this is not always good news. This is good news and bad news. Anybody who has studied the history of religion knows that it can nourish brotherhood, compassion, love, community. But religion, alas, can also invoke or stoke hatred, bigotry, xenophobia. We've had it all. And not just in other religions. We've had it in the history of our religion as well, those of us who call ourselves Christians. So it's a bane and a blessing. It's something we welcome, but it's something we have to think about carefully and be very selective as we write about it or think about it, which I tried to do in the Future of Faith. And people have asked me even the last couple of days, which of your books do you think I ought to read if I want to get introduced to your thinking? And I'm always tempted to say, well, my next one. But I haven't written the next one yet. I may not. So I would say this one, The Future of Faith. It's really a kind of a summation, in a way, of my thinking over these many years. And it's a basically hopeful book. It's a hopeful book. And it kind of a response to those books that say continuing to be written about the death of faith or the death of God or all that. There's some of them still being written and still being circulated. I don't specifically or explicitly try to respond to those writers, but this is a book that takes a different position. And I want to talk a little bit about that this evening with you. The book is in paperback edition now, and we're coming up on the holiday season. Might be a nice gift for somebody you know. Who knows? Now, one of the underlying premises of this book, as you'll notice if you glance at it, is when I think back across the centuries of Christian history specifically, I see it as unfolding in three phases. The first one lasts from Jesus himself and his disciples up through the beginning of the 4th century, up until the 300s, with Constantine. And the next phase, I call that the Age of Faith, that first 300 years or so of Christian history, when being a Christian meant to be a follower, a disciple of Jesus. As St. Paul refers to our predecessors as Christians in those days as the people of the way. People of the way. And let me remind you, in case you've forgotten, that in those first 300 years of Christian history, Christianity was growing vigorously, even though it was persecuted at times, growing all around the Mediterranean basis. We had no uniform creed. We had no uniform form of liturgy. There were a variety of different liturgies blossoming all around the Mediterranean. We had no uniform polity. There were different forms of polity. And yet we seem to be doing fine. We didn't even have church buildings. Most Christians in those first 300 years were meeting in people's homes. The wealthier members of the community with the larger homes, people would come in there. It was only after the 300s. Now, in my view, what happened in those early centuries of the 4th century, in the 300s, under Emperor Constantine, turned out to be a catastrophe for Christianity. I'll put it pretty bluntly. I think it was a really bad turn that was made. What happened? Here's what happened.